Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Learnings with me, Ben Ibrahim. And today we're talking about the topic, What's Going On America, with former senior US diplomat and author of the book, How We Win, Farah Pandith. For those of you who are unaware, I first met Farah in 2013 when she came to Kuala Lumpur for many entrepreneurship conferences, and she is very good in terms of ideation, setting up ideas, strategy plans for startups and entrepreneurs, not just in Malaysia, but around the world. And she was the former Islamic Advisor to Barack Obama, and she was the former presidential advisor to George Bush Senior and Junior, and she's done many, many great things within government, politics, and also entrepreneurship. Farah, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Sunday Learnings. How are you?
I've been great, Ben, and it's so great to be able to have a connect with you despite COVID, despite the Zoom situation. I would much prefer to be with you in KL over lunch or dinner and be able to catch up, because I really enjoy that, and I obviously love Malaysia. But I've had a good year despite COVID, and feel very grateful for that.
Let's get into the topic, what's going on America. Now, let's talk about the obvious. Has the duck, Donald Duck, or the pumpkin left the building?
With regard to President Trump, we've had a clear and very accurate election. And in our history, we've never seen a president who has not been gracious about a loss and has not tried to help the next administration prepare and get ready to go into office in January. I think it is, it's very scary because the world is not an easy place right now. The most important thing, of course, is the global pandemic and getting that under control. And the situation in the United States is among the worst in the world. So a President-elect Biden needs to be able to step in on the first day with a team prepared to go. So all of this has been challenging. I have no question in my mind that everything will be fine, but it's a little bit embarrassing that we have not seen graciousness from President Trump. I remember very clearly, when I was in the George W. Bush administration working at the National Security Council, there was a sense of deep obligation to our nation. Public service is service to the public. It is not about you. It is about serving your nation. And every single one of us swear to uphold the Constitution. This isn't about loyalty to a woman or a man. This is not about, trying to figure out how to make a buck. This is about the values of our country. You should not be a public servant if you are not dedicated in that way. And you saw in President Obama, in both President Bush's, that dedication of country and patriotism in the deepest sense of that word. So they lead with grace, and they lead with honor, and they lead with dedication to democracy and American values. That's what I saw. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm frankly absolutely shocked to be able to have a conversation with you at the end of 2020 around this. Americans have never had to make that statement that we care about the values of democracy. I mean, that's who we were and who we are.
In your personal opinion, what does President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, what do they stand for? Not just to the American people, but to the global world and the global audience?
Well, I think one thing to say, and then I want to tell you that I do think it's going to be a very powerful administration in terms of deliverables for our nation and for the world. In President-elect Biden, you have a man who has deep character and is a public servant at heart. You see that in the words during the campaign, but more importantly, in the actions and the words of the man that he is to our country, to the family, to the way he interacts with regular humans. This is a deeply caring, a deeply gracious, and really kind man. And so I think that is a wonderful thing to move forward with that knowledge that this is somebody who is a good person, you know? I think what you're going to see from the Biden-Harris administration are four very sort of big buckets, if I could put it that way. One is a restoration of democracy. We just were talking about, you know, American values. Obviously, democracy is what we stand for. I think you're going to see a president and vice president who very clearly demonstrate that that's a priority and that we're going to do everything in our power to bring the world together around these themes and our nation together around these themes. I think you're going to see a restoration of reconnectivity with the world. We aren't going to be sitting back. We're going to be engaged. We're, you know, the president-elect has talked about re-engaging on a whole bunch of things from, you know, climate change to the World Health Organization. I think you're going to see Americans at the table again, leading, activated, and really interested in building a stronger, you know, stronger world that we can do together. I think you're going to also see a renewal for issues around global priority. Science is going to lead, innovation is going to lead, whether we're talking about COVID, whether we're talking about the environment, whether we're talking about how to think differently about the humans on this planet and how integrated we are together. I think you're going to see an administration that wants new ideas, is ready to put them into action, and is ready to think out of the box. And I think that's really powerful. And finally, I think that this is going to be an administration, I not just think, but you can tell in the way in which they've talked about this priority, but racial equity is very important to this team of leaders. And our country and the world has been over decades and decades and decades conversing about all these inequities and these challenges and these difficulties around history, around race, around identity and belonging. But our country in the last year, especially in the aftermath of the killing of Mr. Floyd, has had to talk again and again about who we are and what we stand for. And so I think you're going to see a Biden-Harris administration that is going to work on these issues in a new way and with renewed hope. I think nothing is going to be easy in any of the things I've just described. You can't take a magic wand and, you know, make everything perfect again. But I do think, I should say nothing was ever perfect, but I do think that the kind of leadership that you're seeing from these two incredible, inspiring, and dedicated public servants will be bold. And I think it will be a great 4 years and maybe 8.
Black Lives Matter, like you said. The alt-right, how did we get there and how did we get Trump?
I do want to say that nothing happens in a flash. You know, you can't suddenly become a nation that is one way if there weren't things in the system already that were activated, that were building, that were growing. The us versus them ideologies in our country have been building over years and years. And while sometimes we discuss them and sometimes we try to do things, and this is not, by the way, just in government, it's across the board. It's how companies think about themselves. It's how we engage with each other as communities. It's how we respect each other. That mutual respect has to be a forward-leaning principle, and it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. I can give you a very analytical answer. I mean, the conflation of many different trends. I mean, technology hasn't made this better, it's made it worse. It's allowed people to go into their little camps and drill down into their silos and stay there. That's what the algorithms want you to do. And we don't have to have a long conversation about technology and technology companies, but we all get this, okay? So that's been going on at the same time in our country that we've had the boldness of some of these groups that have stayed quiet in the past have decided that with a leader like Trump, who has agitated and fomented hate, that it is okay right now to say what they really believe and to go out there and to activate. So you have that going as well. You indeed also have, and I've been really clear about this. I spent all last year, Ben, and I know we're going to talk about my book, but on a book tour. And I spent a lot of time going across my own country to talk about the rise of hate. And one of the things I've said is that we Americans have been lazy on hate. You know, we've seen things all around, whether it's race or religion or gender or sexuality or whatever the us and them is, you know, you either do something about it or you let it pass, and we've let it pass. And so when you keep letting things go, it's just fine, it's fine, it builds. And so how did we get here? We got here with all of this disinterest in building better communities, more inclusive communities, in not talking with each other, but talking at each other, with allowing the norms of presidential behavior to slip. You have heard President Trump speak very fiercely about ethnic groups, about religions, about races, about demographics. I mean, he has been fierce. That trickles down into the communities that say, if the president says that's okay, I can too. And if he is giving us a signal that says, I believe, in this, I'm gonna go forward and support him. And so, Ben, we are in a dangerous moment, because hate should not be rising in America, and it should not be rising around the world, and yet it is. No, and I'll say one other thing. I grew up outside of Boston, and so in New England, and I wasn't born in this country. I came to America when I was a baby. I was born in northern India. And I can tell you that as somebody who grew up as an American, obviously, but as a Muslim, as somebody who is, used to go back and forth to India growing up every summer to visit my grandfather and my aunts and uncles and cousins and all, I never, ever felt different. I never, ever felt like I was an outsider in the United States. And I think many Americans have had that experience where there has been a flip and a change in our country. You can feel it. For the young people, when I talk to my students, millennials or Generation Z, they say to me that they have grown up with fear. Fear has been consistent in their lives in a way that I never experienced. So you have a generation that, understood 9/11, that happened, a generation that saw gun violence in schools. And so they'd have drills about, a shooter coming into the school. Now they're in a moment of COVID. They've always had this attention that there's something dangerous that has happened, and their identity too upon that as well. And so I think it's a moment for all of us to pause in America and to ask ourselves, not just how did we get here and why have things moved in the direction that they have, but who and what do we want to be going forward, so that these generations of young people can experience a better place to live in that has values that are more universal, humanitarian, and frankly, I think, American.
Well, I've got some advice for the American people. If they want to change, the best way to do it is go to a bookshop and purchase a book called How
Yes.
We Win by Farah Pandith, because Farah's book, all jokes aside, is talking about positive change and how to change yourself, not just individually, but collectively as an individual or a business. Farah, tell us about this book. It's got a great title.
Thank you. And I appreciate the call out for it. I spent a lot of time writing this book. This is not a memoir about my life. This is about me saying to the world, I served very fortunately, feel very honored to have served in both President Obama and President Bush's administrations in a post 9/11 world where we were working on how to stop the rise of hate. How do you make sure that we are protecting young people from the us versus them ideology online and offline? And what I wanted to do was to say to the reader that this isn't all doom and gloom, that we have agency and that collective action can stop hate. Ben, we talked a little bit about that in the questions earlier, but I want to say the punchline for this book is that it's not just government that fixes this. It's government that has to do some things, but the business sector, philanthropists and regular citizens have a role to play. Now, some of your readers, the people that are watching your program are readers, and they will have read the Harry Potter books, okay? And they will know that when I say that we are building Dumbledore's army, they will understand the importance of that. In fact, that's the title of the last chapter in the book, because what I've seen, and I want to bring it back to KL, you know, as special representative to Muslim communities, I traveled all over the world on behalf of the United States, and feel so fortunate to have met hundreds and hundreds of young people in countries all over the world who are eager to build a world that isn't about hate, and they have ideas on the ground that can make a difference. And so what we were trying to do in the work of sort of connecting these young people is to say that person in KL needs to meet that person in Oslo, needs to meet that person in Kampala, because these young people are talking about the same thing. They want to do this stuff. And so this book demonstrates how to do it by connecting the different, these different sectors, and to give, I hope, lots of hope to the reader, to say that solutions are available and affordable right now, any part of the world, to protect our young people from bad actors, whether it is violent white supremacists or it is violent extremists of the ISIS variety. All of these us versus them ideologies are using the same tactics, Ben, to lure in young people. And for those who are watching that are parents, I urge you to please understand that the platforms that your children use are also platforms that bad guys use. And the same way that we would teach our children not to talk to a stranger on this corner of the street or get into a car with somebody they don't know, we've got to teach them technology hygiene to make sure that they don't go down a rabbit hole, not suspecting that at the other end is somebody who's trying to lure them into a hateful ideology.
In the work that you've done, what are you most proud of in terms of trying to make the world a better place?
So what I'm most proud of is the ability to be able to bridge those gaps globally, and to not focus on a region and say, this is what you must do as a Malaysian, but rather see the universal aspects of that. I also want to say one other thing, which is, no one does, you've been very kind in the way you've described me, but no one does things by themselves. I mean, my goodness. My greatest, joy in the role that I had as special representative was working with our embassies all over the world, and American public servants who, like me, were committed to building stronger bonds and ties and bridges with communities all over the world. And so these teams of people that I was so lucky to be able to work with, alongside civil society in countries like Malaysia, resulted in first of a kind programs that are global. And I want to name one program because it's not about, it's a universal program. And I was fortunate enough to work with one of my colleagues at the Department of State named Hannah Rosenthal. And Hannah was the envoy to combat and monitor anti-Semitism. And so
wow.
we had an interesting meeting, actually, Ben, if you'll let me just sort of tell the story, just so that people understand. State Department is super, the State Department is obviously quite big, and you would imagine that certain people would always work with each other. It doesn't always happen that way. Hannah's role was a congressionally mandated role to work on anti-Semitism. And so she had some very specific things she had to do. I've just described what my role was. There was a terrible event that happened in Times Square where there was a bomb that was about to go off, and bad things were happening. And I got a call from Hannah's office. And my assistant said, Hannah Rosenthal, the envoy to combat and monitor anti-Semitism, needs to come see you immediately. And I mean, obviously, I was like, sure, of course. Hannah, who I'd never met, comes into my office and says, did you hear what just happened in Times Square? I said, yes. She said, I want to know what I can do to be helpful, because it coming from somebody who is not Muslim will be more powerful than it coming. And what a amazing, obviously consciousness. And this is who Hannah is, by the way. She's an amazing human being. I tell you this because about a year later, we were both on a diplomatic, mission in Kazakhstan, where we were attending a conference around themes like anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, something that they called Christophobia. And we had, as Americans, had to give statements on each of these things. And so Hannah was going to speak about anti-Semitism. I was going to give the statement from America on Islamophobia. And Hannah, being Hannah and being super smart and creative, decided to do something that we didn't get clearance for, by the way. We swapped speeches. And so when they called on the United States to speak about anti-Semitism, I stood up and I read the statement from America. And when they talked about Islamophobia, Hannah stood up. And so the audience was really confused. They thought that we had messed up and there was a problem. But in fact, what we were doing was giving voice in a different way to an issue. And we ended with something that said, the same paragraph, that hate is hate, no matter who the victim is, right? And I say this, Ben, because what that did is it inspired civil society to say to us, that's all very good that you are giving speeches, but in fact, can't you do more? Now, when you are asked that question, you have to respond and think, well, yeah, we can do more. What should we do? We launched a campaign called Hours Against Hate. And we knew that young people could devote an hour of their time. They may not have a lot of money, they may not have other things, but they could devote an hour of their time. And so this campaign started actually on Facebook. And what we asked people to do was to volunteer an hour of their time for someone who doesn't look like them, pray like them, love like them, or live like them. And what we saw around the world were people, young people all over the world, doing things for the other, walking in somebody else's shoes. And it was an inspirational, wonderful program. And I'm very proud of it because the London Olympics ended up hearing about it and ended up adopting it as part of the London Olympics and Paralympics. Now, why did I tell you this long story? Because sometimes the simplest ideas and the most pure, dedication and interest in doing something can inspire others to do the same. And so I am proud of many, many aspects of the work that I did in public service, but it's programs like that and others that I know have a legacy that is much, much longer than my time in government.
It's been a wonderful interview. Thank you for sharing so much with us about America, about the world, giving some light onto the word hatred, giving a lot of light onto the word change. But since you are a person of service, since you are a person of change, I know the answer for this one. I'm just going to ask it anyway, because you're such an inspiration. Is there any chance you can throw your hat in the ring?
Oh my goodness, Ben, that actually made me laugh this morning here. I'll tell you what, if that should happen, I will call you first and you can do the first interview. Is that a deal?
That's a deal. That's a deal.
Okay.
Farah, seriously, on a serious note, I in my career as a master of ceremonies, as a moderator, as a presenter, I meet a ton of political personalities all around the world. Yes, they all have energy and passion, but you have that X factor that you just want to change the world, and that is infectious. And thank you for being you, and thank you for your friendship, and we'll be in touch. And God bless you. God bless the United States of America. God bless this world. And assalamu alaikum. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Spaghetti, the marshmallows.